Hi, this is Tony Harper, and I'm here with my friend and colleague Mike Whitelegge on March 24th, 2020. Mike works as a data engineering manager in London and lives in its suburbs. We're here to talk about how COVID-19, also known as the coronavirus, has affected life in England and what his experience has been from that. So, Mike, first off, what's it been like to be in England during the COVID-19 pandemic, and how has it changed your daily routine in life?
Okay, so um, it's very difficult times at the moment. I think I'd say we're living through completely unprecedented times. There's almost like an eerie quietness to everywhere at the moment, and quite a heightened sense of I think needing to hear up-to-date information. So the main change to daily life is that nobody's travelling into work. So I normally travel into London. It's about an hour's journey by public transport. And that's not happening. And also, as of last Friday, the children are not going to school unless your parents are key workers and you can't be at home. Also, up to yesterday, in the downtime, I was doing some shared activity, some just social activity, either going for a walk, going for a bicycle ride with some friends, maintaining the social distancing, not being in big groups. But as of yesterday evening, that also will now stop. There are new government guidelines that came out yesterday to try and keep people more isolated than they have been.
Yeah, so following on that, what has been the government response? Like, how did it start, and then I've heard things like Britain is going on in lockdown and that kind of thing, but news is you get lots of news. It's all kind of confusing. So what's really going on there?
Sure. So I think initially there appeared to be very little coming out of the UK government. I'm sure there was lots going on in the background, but very little coming out. And the newspaper stories initially were primarily concerned around creating this herd immunity. But even the most basic mathematician would be able to say that this would result in a really high death toll. Even though it might give us herd immunity, the price to pay would be quite high. There seemed to be a bit of a change towards the end of last week in terms of government communication policy. And there's now a daily press conference that Boris Johnson gives, and it gives us daily update on the status of the situation. That tends to go out around 5 o'clock in the evening. It's become fairly compulsive viewing in my household just to try and hear what's happening. There was an additional presentation yesterday about 8:30 in the evening from Boris Johnson, basically telling everybody from now on they have to stay at home. We're allowed out for the next 3 weeks. We're allowed out once a day for some form of exercise, and we can do that either alone or with the family members that we currently live with. So there's been no mixing with anybody else from any other household. We can go out for essentials such as food or medicine, and you can travel to work if you're classified as a key worker. All of the shops in the UK that don't sell food or medicine have now had to close and will have to stay closed for the next 3 weeks. So that's been the biggest change in the last 24 hours.
Are they checking it at all? I mean, not the shops, but the individuals going out. Are there police or National Guard or anything like that checking it, or is it kind of the honor system right now?
It's the honest system right now. Plus, I live in a fairly rural area. I live in a village of about 1,000 people. We're surrounded by countryside, so I think it's a probably different situation for me to be able to go and have a walk down through the country lanes and through the fields rather than somebody in London. Now, what Boris Johnson has said is that if people don't conform, if businesses stay open, then the police have the power and the councils have the power to close them. And the police also have the power to disperse any gatherings of people that contravene this. And he was pretty serious for him last night when he gave this message out.
Wow. So how are people reacting to this? How do the British people feel about both the virus as well as the lockdown that's been put in place?
My perception is that there's mixed feeling across the UK, and I think it's mixed geographically, and I think it's mixed from an age perspective as well. So some people are taking it really seriously and they're heeding the government advice. My mother, who's in her late 70s, has been effectively stayed in her house for the last 2 weeks, has no plans to go anywhere, has people bringing her groceries, doesn't have people coming into the house. She's taking it really, really seriously. But other people have been completely flouting it. So at the weekend, it was Mothering Sunday in the UK over last weekend, and the number of people who were travelling to the coast, to the beaches, to the parks, the weather was relatively good for this time of year. And it was crazy how many people were moving around. And I think that's what's led to this harsher regime coming in from the government. And I said before, Boris has stated that if people do continue to flout it, then the police will be able to get out fines and be able to close shops and businesses and disperse gatherings. I think one of the biggest impacts in the UK has been about people stockpiling food. So there was an announcement in one of the press conferences over the weekend that Britons have bought an extra £1 billion worth of food over the last week that's now sitting in their cupboards. Most supermarkets have put restrictions on, so you can only buy no more than one of everything. So one container of milk, one loaf of bread, one packet of eggs, and so on. And they've also, the supermarkets have implemented restrictions to allow separate early opening hours for the vulnerable people, so the elderly people, and also the essential health workers. So yeah, a real mix of people's how serious people are taking it across the country.
Have you been to the shop for groceries? Are there particular shortages of any particular items? Here in the US, it's toilet.
Yeah, it was toilet roll in the UK. I went shopping on Saturday into my local supermarket, and there was no fresh vegetables, no milk, no eggs, no fresh meat, no bread, but there was toilet roll. That was the only thing that we're able to buy.
Quite the opposite experience for me here in California. We've got, of course, it's a farming state, so we have lots of fresh vegetables and stuff on the shelves, but no paper products whatsoever to be found.
No, it's strange. And I noticed that the advice is to get online shopping delivered where you can. None of the major supermarkets in Britain have got any available either click and collect slots or delivery slots for at least the next 3 weeks.
Yeah, that's how it is here in California too. So I had to go in on Saturday as well, and we had a crowd of people loosely congregated at the store half an hour before it opened, waiting to get in, which is unheard of, in my lifetime at least.
Yeah.
So switching gears a bit, Britain's National Health Service has been held up as a model by some of what healthcare could be. How is the NHS coping with this, and do you think it's left Britain in a better position to deal with this pandemic than, say, the healthcares of other countries?
Okay, so I'd say my view, and I'm not an expert in any way, shape, or form about the National Health Service. I think if we're not careful about slowing down the spread of the virus, the NHS won't be able to cope. There's lots of comparisons in the UK between the UK and Italy, where obviously they're much further through the impact of the virus and the crisis there. I think from the media, we're about 2 weeks. We're tracking about 2 weeks behind. So the UK National Health Service, it's well set, but it does have a finite amount of resources and equipment. So there's quite a lot in the news at the moment about the lack of ventilators. There's a real push to get UK manufacturing industries to stop building what they normally build and stop building ventilators. And I think some have taken that challenge up. There's also been quite a call for people who have recently left the health service, whether they've retired or moved on to different jobs, to go back into the health service to really boost those numbers. Now, whether only time will tell whether the health service will cope. I think it's a case of trying to flatten out that spike and try and level it to just buy some time. I think, which is what Italy are trying to do. I'm not saying the NHS is better than the Italian health service. We know how overrun they became very quickly.
Yeah, we same in the U.S. My brother was telling me he lives in Hawaii, and he said there's only 500 ventilators in the whole state. And so they're seriously concerned about this as well, because they're an island and you just can't easily get stuff to them. So previous crises, such as the Second World War, caused major societal changes. Others, like the 1918 flu pandemic, probably less so. What do you think? What do you think we're gonna see to society after this is all over? Is it going to change things, or are we just going to go back to normal?
No, I don't see it going back to normal. It may be over a long time, but I can see with this a real sense of community re-emerging. As I mentioned before, I live in a relatively small village. There's a local self-managing group that's appeared who are ensuring that the more vulnerable people in our community are looked after. So people are able to get food, shopping, and medicines for them. I'd like to think that once this is over, that same level of community still exists. I know it's not just happening in the villages; it's happening in different suburbs in London, where there's certain streets are trying to pull together just to sort of look after each other. So I suppose if we get that sense of community to continue, and also that make people a bit more appreciative of what they've got and take things less for granted. I know I certainly will. I hadn't quite realised how much I take just being able to go out and travel into London as something that I can just do when I want to do. Mm-hmm. And I think it's when you take away some of those things, then you start to appreciate them a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. I was telling my wife last night that I miss San Francisco. I'm also in the suburbs and really love being able to go up into the city. And we're just kind of stuck here now, and it makes you appreciate those things. I've seen an explosion of reconnection with my old friends that maybe I hadn't talked to very much, and my family as well. We're talking more. So I think it's good for that way. But I sincerely hope that I hope that sticks. I hope the togetherness sticks. We need more of that.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah.
So is there anything else you'd want people to know, or any other thoughts you'd want to leave them with?
I suppose that, as I said earlier, they're really unprecedented times. And I think the scary thing is, for me, is just the global nature of this virus. I do believe, though, that if we stand any chance of beating it, then we've got to follow the advice that we're being given. I think social distancing is got to be by far the best thing that we can possibly do to just try and prevent it spreading. I have no idea how long this is going to go on for. I suspect this lockdown in the UK will extend from 3 weeks probably to 8 weeks, if not longer. I can't see things getting anywhere near back to normal for at least 3 or 4 months, but I don't have a crystal ball. This is just just my gut feel based on what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I think you're right. We'll see. But as we've done more testing in the U.S., the number of cases we find just keeps going up and up. And I realize that it's not spreading as quickly as the testing is going on, which is good in a way. But we don't know the bottom of it until we get more testing out there. So, okay, well, that's all I've got. So, Mike, thank you very much. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.
It's great hearing your perspective.
Thanks very much. Nice to talk to you.